Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Wednesday, July 1st, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It's Wednesday. We're back to our regular programming, so doing a little campaign discussion today. And we're going to focus today a little bit on running NPCs. There was a little piece I put out as part of the Whispering Woodwind adventure that I put out in 2001. It was early in the 3.xe era, 3.0 actually, because 3.5 wouldn't come around for a few years. But you can see it up on the title screen there on the left, using a wonderful Howard Pyle drawing for the cover. It all revolved around a missing bard and a burning inn and a magical flute that was stolen. Bit of a MacGuffin, but not completely, because eventually you could recover the flute, but chasing this flute would take you through a series of encounters that some you could avoid, some you could get around. You could deal with the encounters in any number of ways. There were a number of red herring sort of things along the way that could lead you astray from eventually recovering the flute, or at least finding the bard who had purportedly stolen it. And then, of course, there's the idea, if I recall correctly, because it's been a while, the bard actually was the owner of the flute, but had to give it up to pay off some gambling debts or some such, and had to leave it in sort of safekeeping with the individual who he owed money to, and then instead of paying to get it back, stole to get it back, which is just naughty. It's a no-no. Am I right? Am I wrong? He's obviously not a Lannister if he's not paying his debts. So there are no Lannisters in my campaign, in my setting, so obviously not a Lannister. In any event, let's see where we're at here. There we go. We'll bring this up on the old Adobe Acrobat. Beautiful David L. Pancake background there called The Wizard's Study. I got a print of that, and the artist was kind enough to include a high-res digital edition of the print that I picked up, and gave me permission to use it as a background on the stream here. It really is pretty cool. You can see it. It's in its entirety over on David L. Pancake's artist website. It's called Wizard's Study, and it's pretty nifty. Anyway, this was the adventure. Let me move this over here so I can check it out a little easier. Whispering Woodwind, lovely. Has a full breakdown. Each encounter, of which there were 14, which was sort of the trend back then for adventures. Let's see. Yeah, I had did some adjustments to it in 2002, and then again in 2008. I reassessed the encounters and the NPCs and upgraded them to 3.5 so that it would be compatible with the new edition. I guess it's not a new edition. It's a, I don't know, what do you call that? There's the flute on the side, right? Lovely map. Charleston, which is kind of a big city in my campaign, but the city's right here. This is all farmlands and orchards. We've got livestock. We've got spring crops, winter crops, in that sort of rotation, that trimester rotation of crops. It is a temperate zone, so that works out. Orchards, there's the town, or Thorpe, in this case, town. In this case, Parview is a smaller village, smaller than a village, a Thorpe. Encounters are denoted on this map. Some encounters before you get too far away from civilization. I have that all keyed on the adventure. And then we get a little preface, just a meta preface, an overview of what's going on, or how to deal with the system, or deal with the the structure of the adventure. We get a little behind the scenes, going back 20 years, a quick half-page information on that. Summary of encounters. Each encounter is split out, and I like to even do this myself for when I'm running a campaign. I like to set up status quo adventures. They used to, this is some information, some phrasing they used in the DMG in 3rd edition, was that you could either have status quo encounters or even adventures where they were what they were. When you went there, they were that way. If you didn't go there for another 6 months, they were still as written. If you went and interacted with some portion of it and then left and then came back, it would remain as it was, status quo. So there's an idea that some of those things are status quo and some things were balanced. Some things were flexible in that depending on what level you were when you went there, it would be adjusted to be suitable for your level. And let's face it, that's a trope that goes all the way back. That's a design consideration that goes all the way back to early D&D. Even the earliest modules were meant to be played with a certain number of player characters at a certain range of levels. So there was a sweet spot for when you were meant to encounter them. And if you encountered them too early, it was TPK City. And if you got there too late, it would be a Monty Hall cakewalk. You just get right through them far too easily. Well, I tried to incorporate something within this adventure, and I kind of do that when I set stuff up, when I write stuff for my own campaign, because players take left turns all the time. Just when you think they're going east, they decide, hey, what was that thing in the south that we heard about? And off they go running to the south, and whatever work you did on stuff to the east is just going to have to sit there. So do you leave it as is and leave it as a cakewalk later? Or do you consider it as they're doing other things and revisit it and make some adjustments? Well, one of the things I try to build into this adventure, and I try to do it with other things that I write just for my own games and campaigns, is called adjusting the bar. Pretty straightforward. Anytime there's an encounter, you just make a few notes for uh, various levels of encounter. So if they run into what would normally be a challenging but fair encounter for a group, let's say this next game session, you've only got 2 players out of 6, and you don't have any clerics, you don't have any spellcasters at all. It's a fighter and a thief. Okay, Fafra and the Grey Mouser time. But do we just abandon where they want to go, or tell them in a meta way, nah, don't go there, save that for, well, you can, certainly, or you can make some changes on the fly. And sometimes if you have some notes available that you've kind of preconceived about how you might make those adjustments on the fly, even if that doesn't really mean on the fly anymore, well, it's still a good thing. LexFire22, hey, how you doing? Good morning. Thanks for coming out. So I have 5 different levels. 3 is playing it by the book. 3 is right in the middle. 3 is you got what you consider the standard number of players that you have based on when you put the material together, the encounters, the scenario. When you conceived it, you thought, you know what, I've usually got 5 out of my 6 players. Most of the time, it's a pretty good mix. I'm going to create this village, this dungeon nearby, whatever, with that group in mind, and then you create it. And let's face it, there's if you're going to publish something, great if you can get some playtesting in, but we don't playtest stuff when we run campaigns for ourselves and our groups locally. Generally, we don't have time. Maybe we get a little bit of that in if we do a lot of convention going or game day running, or we run stuff at stores for multiple groups, then we sort of get a little play testing in. But there's always that first group, and what you write uh, hopefully can withstand the contact with that initial group. So playing by the book is just what you wrote, how you set it up. They experience it in that way, and more power to them if they're successful. However, there's a kind of a sense that you can set up a campaign encounter or a campaign full adventure or a region um, with a few things in mind. You can make it super easy. Call it holding their hands. So we've got this range. Number 1, holding their hands. You've got new players, and maybe only 2 total who still haven't mastered any of the rules. Every now and again they surprise you, but most of the time they simply don't understand the game mechanics. Alternately, 1 player has purchased a rule book and read part of it, but the rules really have nothing to do with role playing to this group. Perhaps another has dice but prefers to avoid rolling them. In this case, you lower the bar to 1. So each encounter within the rest of the adventure has a little sidebar that says what you can do to really make it a much easier, much simpler encounter for a group that is super new or heavily depleted or low on players that week. Then there's an in between, that full bore by the book and holding your hands that I call, allowing some leeway. The players have a basic understanding of the rules, but you prefer not to slow down the game by adhering to the letter of the law. They are satisfied with your interpretations of the mechanics and would rather keep things moving, even if that means they overlook some of the details of the rules. Alternately, 1 of the players didn't show up this week, and another will have to leave halfway through due to other commitments. You'd like to get through enough of the session to have fun, but not if this means that a couple of them will be rolling up new characters next week. So you adjust down to number 2. Now, there are times where you're running something, let's say this, at a convention as a one-shot, and you've got a group. You've got a group of players that are pretty experienced with the rules. They know what they're doing. Well, you can bump it up a notch. An extra player or two has showed up, or let's say a couple of people have brought along a couple of friends, or you're running it at a convention and there's some people that are looking for a game. So you say, yeah, pull up a chair. Go ahead, pull up a couple of chairs. So you throw out a couple extra pre-gens. Suddenly you've got 7 players instead of 5, or 8 players instead of 6. So you bump it up. An extra player or two has shown up, can't be sent home without playing. Perhaps the treasure levels have been a little generous in the past. This will even out in time, but for now, these players are sitting in fine feather, just up to number 4 or number 5. You've just got this crack troop of players who know all the rules inside and out, maybe better than you. You really got to challenge them. You got to find a way to make this a lot more difficult, or they're just not going to have fun. I'm not saying you're trying to show them up. I'm saying you're trying to keep them involved and keep them interested. So the group has a lot of players, sometimes with multiple characters, enjoy having an entourage. Yeah, there you go. Maybe the players have collected some NPC henchmen and hirelings along the way. Alternately, this group of players know the rules better than the writers. They always like to have the best tools for the job, build their characters to be specialists, and spend all of their treasure to ensure they have the highest advantages. Well, some people don't like the idea of players that are min-maxers. Personally, that's just one other aspect of playing, in my opinion. It can be a lot of fun with people that really know what they're doing. So dialing it way up does that. So each of the encounters in here, and this is a campaign consideration for yourself too, where you set up your games in such a way that you're ready for anything. You're ready for newbie groups, you're ready for experienced groups, you're ready for fewer players or more players. Um, you're just all set. So this way, if you make some of these notations in your own campaign notes as you create your encounters and your adventures, you're setting yourself up to have a successful game session, no matter what random chance throws at you in regard to the skill levels or the number of players you wind up having. Good to do. We call that adjusting the bar. Now, when it comes to running NPCs, there's something that I've set up in this adventure, and this is something I've done for a very long time. This is almost 20 years. 20 years ago, and Creative Mountain Games will be 20 years old this December, surprisingly to me. Believe me, I was already old when I was already in my mid to late 30s when I set up Creative Mountain Games back in the early with the advent of the OGL. So it's been a while. Anyway, something that I've always done is create a sort of a shorthand for attitudes for NPCs, and it's called the CMG PROSE System. Um, that's how I codified it, and I codified it specifically to add into this adventure way back when. I still use it personally. Sometimes a little loose when I'm using it, but it's a guideline. It's like anything else. It's to help make it easier on you, not to tie your hands or to put you in a straitjacket. So you should never think of anything like this as something you have to do by the book stringently. You should always look on this as some guidelines to help you to make things smoother, to make things faster, to make things more enjoyable, and don't let it ruin your day. Hey, Hobbsy, how you doing there? Cracked players, yeah, no doubt. When you've got some cracked players, you absolutely need to make sure they are engaged. Ink Dweller, good to see you too. Thanks for being here. So, CMG PROSE System. Let me just read through some of this for you. One of the most difficult tasks for any DM is to get players to suspend their disbelief. Doing so helps players to role-play their own characters and be absorbed into the campaign setting. In those brief hours, the gaming table seems to disappear and the world unfolds before them. There are few things more engaging than seamlessly introducing characters with which the players can interact. It is useful to have pre-generated stat blocks and physical description and some background for characters that the players may encounter. And some people don't even do this, and more power to you if you don't. Again, just guidelines. You know, if I've got the 6 stats, and we're talking D&D here, and for me this is a 3.5 adventure setup in this one, but you know, works just as well with first edition, which I run most of the time, or 5th edition, or anything. So if you have the stats laid out, boy, it's just so easy to look at those and think of ways that the character would interact with PCs. Because if I see that he's a very strong character, but not very bright, there's an easy tip for you how to run that character, right? So you've got those things. It's a further help to enrich each persona with a multifaceted perspective of their own. To help that become an easier task, the CMG PROSE system breaks down the attitude of primary NPCs with the approach they take to handle any situation. It prioritizes how they view the world in regard to, and here's where PROSE comes in as an acronym, politics, religion, others, self, and economics. Each area of the PROSE is rated from 1 to 10 and should be considered as an independent rating of how highly they regard each aspect. A high rating in one aspect does not disallow a high rating in another. High ratings in 2 aspects simply mean that they are both equally weighed in decisions that are made on a daily basis. This can be a conscious or subconscious process. In addition, 3 key words, adjectives or adverbs, are given to help show how those priorities manifest themselves during an interaction. A little side note, should be noted that this system is meant to enhance both alignment and charisma. Alignment is the strongest determinant of one's attitude, and charisma is the ability by which one expresses oneself from moment to moment. Not necessarily just looks on charisma. Let's keep that in mind. Also with alignment, I'm a big proponent of alignment being an assessment of what you've done, not a determinant of what you are going to do. And this can be as true for NPCs. Because remember, if I'm truly running a game as a referee, as a facilitator, a neutral arbiter of the world for the players to interact with, then when I roll a pair of dice for the attitude of an NPC, how they react, then that reaction, if it's really hostile, and this was a good NPC, but these are clearly clerics of a good temple because of the symbols that the PCs are wearing, well, I have to have some way of gauging that retroactively, and that might be an alignment shift. So I don't look at that PC's alignment and say, this PC is always going to react nicely to these PCs. This NPC, rather, isn't always going to react nicely to these PCs. Rather, I let random happenstance dictate things, let the dice fall where they may, and then I have to come up with reasons why this has happened. There may be extenuating circumstances. This NPC may know someone that these PCs have had a run-in with and who maybe they killed, some neutral person that this other good NPC was friends with or was family with, and maybe that is now the tipping point for why this NPC is turning from good to edging toward evil, or maybe stays good but thinks righteous anger is the correct approach to dealing with these good PCs. So alignment's not going to force that NPC to always be one way. but rather is going to be a gauge of what they have done. So, um, all that being said, with alignment and charisma not being overridden by these things, still, we get into each of the aspects. Politics can play an important role in how one views the world and one's place in it. A high rating in this aspect doesn't necessarily mean that someone is active in politics, though he can be. It can simply mean that they are aware that politics affect their lives. To a person of noble birth, it might be a driving force causing them to pursue a higher office or even the crown. To someone of common birth, it might be the axe they grind, always blaming their lot in life on the machinations of those in authority. Someone with a low rating in this aspect is likely to view politics as trivial, believing that in the long run, the petty squabbling of those in charge means absolutely nothing to their existence. Religion, being the R in prose, is often the guiding force of a person's life to the exclusion of all else when this aspect rating is high. They may view it as a calling or the means by which they need to govern their lives. They might even perceive daily life as inconsequential, thinking that, come what may, their fate is predetermined by powers beyond their control. Someone with a low rating in this aspect is likely to view any religious views as mindless babble, preferring to believe that daily life is much more pragmatic and less spiritual in nature. Prose O, being others, is the aspect area where a high rating may indicate love for one's family or fellow man. Someone who prioritizes others highly will often go out of their way to ensure the comfort of another or seek to redress wrong on someone else's life. A low rating might mean that the person wouldn't even shout a warning if they saw immediate harm coming to another person, preferring to not get involved in situations that do not directly concern them. S, being self, is a high aspect for those with strong self-esteem and self-interest. Putting one's interests before anything need not be overt, though. It can also be something that is achieved through subtle manipulation. A low rating usually projects itself as self-loathing or self-deprecation. High ratings in both others and self can manifest itself as the love of all humanity. A low rating in both can be the mark of an idealist who perceives humanity as not worth considering while following one's goals. Economics is the aspect where financial goals or lack of them play an important role. A merchant with a high rating is often the wealthiest person in town. A high rating in someone without means may manifest in looking for a way to get rich quickly or always on the hunt for money. A low rating can be shown as someone who lives from day to day without a care, even if they have money, or someone who sees no need to accumulate wealth. And you get your keywords. Keywords are useful as quick guides to jumping into a character. There's an old theater saying, once you have the hat and shoes for a character, the rest falls into place. This is also true with keywords. Interaction based on a few easy-to-utilize tags gets the ball rolling and allows the DM to run with a character rather than trying to invent something completely new and interesting on the fly. Part of the trick to making most use of the CMG PROSE system is knowing in advance who the characters are and using the ratings as a reminder of how they would interact with others. If a financial negotiation ensues from a meeting, a quick glance at economics reveals the priorities of the character. If complimented, check the self-rating and see if they are easily flattered or view such praise with suspicion. Asking someone to assist in a rescue attempt warrants a peek at the other's rating to determine if they are likely to help. Suggest a ritual be performed to ensure safe passage, and the religion rating can tell the DM if someone finds this distasteful. Being friends with the magistrate may be of help if you're dealing with someone who has a high politics rating. The combinations are endless, but that is by design. The PROSE system is by no means meant to hamstring the DM during play. It's meant to help DMs create three-dimensional characters and to avoid having their many portrayals become similar. If a given rating could upset the current plot line, adjust it and move along. I throw that in. I'm not one to do that. From my perspective, the story is a byproduct of gameplay, and so if there's something that's going to disrupt what's going on within the game, so be it. Other people have a certain series of adventures or cut scenes in between that they want to play out in a particular way to present a sort of a story. In that type of game, you might have to ignore any number of random rolls or um, adjust encounters on the fly so that those things fit within your expectation of how that narrative should unfold. Anyway, the DM should always feel that the game is more important than any individual component and not feel cornered by these guidelines. And so, that is the PROSE system in a nutshell and adjusting the bar. So we've looked at a couple of those, and I think, yeah, we're just past the 30-minute mark. So there you go. That's a good thing. We've had a very good, quick, if my apologies if reading a lot of that started to get a little on the boring side. I wanted to cover it, and also wanted to read through it aloud just to see how it feels. Again, I've of course read it a number of times over the years and recently to myself, but you know, when you read something aloud, it can sometimes take on a very different flavor or tenor than when you read it to yourself, because sometimes you look at what's on the page, thanks, Ink Dweller, and you see what you expect to see. But when you read something aloud, usually if you're stumbling while you're reading, there's something worth looking at more closely where you stumbled because it's not meeting your mental expectation. So there's another campaign tip. When you're putting something together for a campaign, don't just get it on paper. Take a minute off on your own where people won't think you're losing it, and go ahead and read it aloud to yourself so that you can hear it and enjoy it and make some adjustments to it. You want to just say that we're back on the regular schedule. So do not forget, tomorrow, terrain crafting and miniature painting. I might do an update on the catapults, which have been coming along a little bit, but also there's a terrain thing I want to discuss. We'll see what that's all about tomorrow. Building virtual tabletop adventures. I was looking at a map yesterday of an overland map, which was a Dyson Logos recent offering, and I noticed some things about the map that I hadn't noticed when I first looked at it, in that there are a number of sections of the map that appear to evoke other maps he's done in the past. Well, there you go. So now I want to put two and two together, figure out what those are, and maybe incorporate this into a sort of a mini campaign setting. Virtual tabletop adventure building on Friday will probably include that. Saturday, we're going to get back to the Conan the Adventurer animated series DM running review perspectives with episode 5 from the series. Rules retrospective on Sunday. Still not sure what I'm going with there. We finished up something just before Harryhausen weekend, and we're getting into a new thing. Really, I could have done what I did today there, but it's not really rules. They're just guidelines. So maybe we'll look at something more specific in the rules. Feel free to give me some ideas as we get closer. And then, of course, back around to Monday when we'll do some weekly news and the giveaway. Thank you so much to everybody who's following the channel. I appreciate it, and thanks for chiming in while you're here. Don't forget that when you do chime in while you're here, you are getting yourself added to our weekly giveaway drawing. Let's see. I got Lexfire in there already. You know what? I don't think has Hobbs been here this week yet? No. Okay, well, we'll get you in there, Hobbsy. And who else do we got that's here today? Ink Dweller is speaking up, and I think I've already got you in for this week. Yes, I do. This is week 14, by the way. Boy, it just flies along. Do you know this is episode 111 of the OK Grognard Show, which I started doing with the advent of shutdowns? Um, Really, it was just something to do to keep me occupied and keep track of the days of the week when I first started messing around with it in late March. And doing it daily has certainly helped me keep track of the days of the week. And here we are. Thank you for following. Thanks for chiming in on the chat. I appreciate that. Also, if you're catching up with us on YouTube, do me a favor and click subscribe. That'll get you a notification whenever we upload a new one, which is daily. And then hit the thumbs up or make a comment. Give us a little feedback. It is much appreciated. Well, that's it for today on the OK Grognard Show, and I want to thank everybody again. Please do pop on in tomorrow, and we will see you then, 9:30 a.m. Central from beautiful Lake